I would say the one tactic that I always love is this tactic called link and trade. So we use the example where the sales rep just hears silence and then cuts price. Link anything that you do, any give that you make to the customer, link it to something else.
Hey everybody, it's Dick Polipnick here. Welcome back to another episode of Online Growth Systems. My special guest today is Sean Higgins. He's the entrepreneur in residence at TechStars in Minnesota. Sean, do you want to just kind of tell us more about yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me, Dick. So, the interesting thing about TechStars is we're an ecosystem that really tries to help entrepreneurs succeed. So we run programs in communities like Startup Weekend, Startup Week, to trying to help bring people together who have ideas and haven't quite figured it out. So that's in the early stage, trying to help people get off the ground and get their businesses going. And then we have traditional accelerator programs. The program I'm a part of in town is the TechStars Retail Program. In that program, we work with companies all across the world, in retail in some way, shape, or form, trying to help them grow their business, whether that's figuring out their message, really honing in on the value prop they can have, all the way to their business model, helping them figure out how they can scale, how they can get initial traction with their customers. And so we're really trying to be this end-to-end, ecosystem for a company where you can get started, get growth, and then ultimately now with TechStars Ventures, we're doing investments in later stage companies as well. So it's really just a great organization. I'm thrilled to be a part of it. My background, I've started companies in town. I started ilos Videos. We were a B2B software as a service company. I led sales there from $0 to $1 million in annual recurring revenue, raised $3 million. I'm also a partner at a micro VC based in the region, Router Ventures.
Awesome. So we're going to be diving into each part of your story. And today, for those of you who are listening, watching, or reading this, we're actually going to be diving into Sean's expertise in his field, because the things that most people ask him about are fundraising, startup sales, how to scale from 0 to 10 customers, from 10 to 50, from 50 to beyond. Yeah. And remind me the third thing that you're most known for.
Yeah, so the other thing folks will generally ask me on is just kind of general startup advice. So you see a lot of people who have an idea and they're not quite sure if it's time to burn the boats. They're not quite sure what they can do to validate and actually prove out their idea to get started. So just that first kind of idea initial validation. Spark.
Right.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And that's actually something for my listeners. They're well aware that I've got too much experience probably with that last one, with pursuing an idea for, let's say, 6 months or 2 years before you decide to say, I think there's a better opportunity in another area, or B, man, this isn't going to work. You know what I mean?
Right.
You just have to cut your losses, because you're like, if I just spend another 6 months at it, pursuing, investor ABC or customer, ABC, that's what's going to get me over this hump. That's what's slowing me down. And you just you see it, you see the horizon, but eventually reality just has to kind of hit you. And you have to say, is this a viable product? Are people wanting it? Or are they not wanting it because I'm doing a bad job pitching, which is something you can fix? Or are they not wanting it because it's a shitty product or it's a bad, opportunity?
It's so funny you mentioned that. One of the things I talk to people about is this whole idea of, why don't we focus on just being good? Can we do that first? I'll see companies that'll pitch. They'll say, Sean, if I just had 200K, if I just had 500K, I could go out and get this customer. And you kind of go, really? Your product is just kind of wireframes that you've drawn together here for me. What if you actually just went out and made it? Spent a month and made an MVP, made a product, a minimum sellable product that you could get in front of your customers. What if you focused on that instead of focus on those other pieces? Because if you can be good, I'll tell you, getting customers, getting financing, it's all easier when you've got something that folks actually want.
Yeah, that's interesting. So could you kind of dive into a case study of somebody who, you don't have to say obviously any names or the company names or but kind of say the general industry of what the product was in, what their struggles were, and then did they end up fixing something, and did they make an MVP and did it work, or did they just keep going down the route that they were going and it didn't work out?
Yeah, I can even use, ilos, the company that I started, right? So when we created our product, we thought we were going to be a corporate YouTube. And we said we'd be a place where people could host their video content. Anytime you needed to find an answer, you could access it right through that platform. And when we started talking to customers, so, early stage, that all made total sense on our whiteboard. That's how we were going to go get customers. That's how we were going to go get traction. But then we did something. We started talking to customers, and we found out more and more and more. It seems so obvious, but most people don't do it. They think it looks so perfect on the whiteboard, and they never want to ruin their pretty picture. So they never actually go out and try it out. So we talked to customers. The customers told us that the things that they valued actually weren't necessarily the back-end storage, this whole management piece, is much more on the recording. How can you keep that quick ability to record? And what we found was that, the ability to make video and have it just be fast, something you could record and share instantly, opened video up as a use case to teams that weren't really using it, teams in sales, teams in support, teams in general, training who weren't videographers. They could whip up some video content now and send it off to their team. And we never would have learned that if we had gone out and raised money or tried to raise money right away. We would have raised money around the wrong thing. It wouldn't have been validated. We probably wouldn't have been able to raise money just because we didn't have any homework that we had done. But because we went this way, we were really able to validate with your customers. So the thing I always tell people is, I don't really care how pretty it looks on your whiteboard, right? The customer decides if it's right or wrong. You have to talk to them. That's how this all works.
Right. So how far into the venture were you when you started talking to customers?
Oh man, I still remember the moment. So there were three of us founders at ilos. It was myself, Nick Stockman, and Peter Ferris. And so, Nick is our product leader, our visionary. As Peter was our technical guy. He created most of the code. And I originally was the finance guy. Those are the roles we'd carved out for ourselves. And you kind of realize at an early stage startup, as the finance guy, you really have nothing to do. You're like, yep, I paid the 2 bills this month.
Yeah.
Great. Like, I'm glad I'm adding value to the team, right? Just nothing to do. And I remember kind of looking around one day. I think we were in Peter's basement or, at like a local library or something, any of the spots we could just all get together. It was very rare that we were all together in the early days. And Peter was, coding away on something. Nick was drawing on a new wire. And I kind of thought to myself, and I was like, who's going to talk to the customers? And I was looking at him, and I looked at the other one, and I'm like, who's going to talk? And I was like, oh, wait. It's going to be me, like process of elimination, right? You're the last man standing.
Yeah, it's not you. Yeah.
It's not you. So it's going to be me. Okay. And so, a few days after that, I sent out my first cold email, and I sent an email to 20 people in town, and it was so custom, and I typed it all out by hand, and I sent them all, and I thought I was crushing it. I was like, this is how you do sales. And then no one responded to me. Period. No one responded. And then I did it again the next day. No one responded. And the next day, no one responded. And so eventually I realized, wow, I'm spending way too much time on my outreach and my message sucks. I need to be able to test my message and my pitch. And so that's really what got me thinking. And the questions that I know now that I wish I had known then, where you need to be able to answer why anything, why us, why now in the eyes of your customer before you're ready to send that email. You need to have a theory around what the value is, right? Why does your category matter? Why anything? Why does your product beat out the other products or whatever they're doing today for this? That's your why us. And why now? Why should they move today instead of in 6 months? How can you create urgency? Some businesses will have urgency. There will be a regulation or an initiative or some like forcing function that creates this need for the customer to buy quickly. But most deals, you don't actually have that. So how can you manufacture a little bit of that urgency? How can you use an exploding offer or use kind of this social proof point to show that this company's falling behind by not being involved in your solution? Those are just a lot of the things that I learned from that journey.
So what did you do? What did you do to manufacture that reality for your customers?
Yes. Okay. So for us, so why anything, we actually learned that we wanted to target people who already knew the answer to why anything. So if you were a customer and you're like, I don't know, why should I use video? We would say, see you later. You're not for us. And then in the space where you were using video, our value prop was really clear. We had better usability and we were a cheaper product, which usually meant, hey, you're going to get way more engagement than what you've had previously with this crazy expensive solution. And you're going to spend a little bit less in the process. So that kind of became our why us. And in terms of manufacturing urgency, that exploding offer side of things, we would get creative. We would run campaigns in certain industries featuring our customers. So maybe if you're a construction customer, we would mention Mortensen Construction and how they were able to leverage ilos to do X, Y, and Z. And here's why, you're kind of falling behind. If you're not, you're doing these things. We also would run exploding offer campaigns. So if you, did something like show us your bill in a given month, we would be willing to match that price or guarantee you some savings and match you capability for capability. Stuff like that got people interested and moving in the ways that we wanted them to. So
interesting.
Yeah. So there's a lot of ways you can kind of manufacture that urgency. That was one part of the equation. The other part I want to bring up, I stopped manually typing out all these emails pretty quick. You need to use sales automation because you're an army of one, right? The big companies you're competing against, they've got a bunch of people like marching to the beat, hitting the phones, and they can send out manual emails. You can't afford to do that. You've got to get smart with your sales automation. Even if it's just simple things, like every time you send an email, have a couple automated follow-ups. And so you can use tools like reply.io. Like back in my day, SalesLoft was the tool. They had an entry-level plan where you could buy one seat. They no longer have that. They're still a great tool for teams. But I use reply.io. I use HubSpot. You just got to send out some automation in a quick jiffy. Like that's the way you can do it without having to manually type out 100 emails.
Right. So I really like that you're mentioning like actual tools and like URLs that, viewers can actually go to. What are some of your favorite tools, Sean, that you use today?
Oh man. So today there's a few. So it really depends on the part of the sales stack that you're looking at. So I'll start with my first ones. So before you can even outbound, you need to have information around your customer, right? So you need to have email addresses, phone numbers. And in order to get that information, there's a couple different ways you can do it. There's actually a new tool that I've been hearing a lot about, and I'm getting a demo with them this week, but everyone else I've talked to swears by them, so I'm trying them out. It's Seamless AI. Seamless AI is list building as a service. So you pay like a monthly fee and they'll do just-in-time lead generation for you, which is pretty cool. I'm interested in learning more about how they're doing it. My process is I use Upwork for that. So I hire data scrapers on Upwork to find email addresses. And you do that, it'll cost you about 15 to 30 cents a contact, and they'll be able to pull in, the email, the direct dial number, their name, the link to their LinkedIn profile. And you can use all of those different pieces in your sales outreach and automation. That's one. In terms of direct outreach, I really like reply.io for early days. Like you can set up a series of emails and they'll go out, on your behalf at certain times and touch points. It eliminates all of the hesitance you might face around, I already emailed him. Am I being annoying? It gets rid of that, eliminates it from the equation, helps you be on the ball with your outreach, which is so important. And then lastly, HubSpot or, Salesforce, kind of that CRM tool where your data can live. I'm a big HubSpot person. I contribute to the HubSpot blog. I'll be at Inbound this September. I think they've got a great product. They're doing some really powerful things out there. And I use their sales tools and their CRM to kind of be that source of record for all of my deal data.
That's awesome. So when you do a deal with whether it's a firm or a startup that you are mentoring, funding, or you're working with in the accelerator, do you like kind of give them some of these tools or like?
Oh yeah. So
specific advice.
Absolutely. So in terms of getting started, I really start with one of two things. And we've touched on both of them a little bit. When people struggle with outbound or if they're trying to get their outbound off the ground, there are two things that will really dramatically shift your success. And so one is your message, right? It's those three questions. Do you have a real good answer to each of those three questions? And ultimately, the only judge of that matters is your customer. And it matters in a few different areas. It'll matter in your email open, your response rate, your connect rate if you're on the phone. That's really where that comes in. The number of people that once you talk to them, are they willing to book a demo with you and move further down the funnel? The other is data integrity, right? Bad data at the top means it doesn't matter. You have to hit that many more people. And this is what drives it drives me crazy, Dick. So a lot of folks out there will tell you to like buy a list. Have you ever heard someone say, just buy a lead list? Has that come up ever?
Oh my God. Actually, that's come up in interviews that we've had on the show. Not to like badmouth past guests,
no.
But that's a very common strategy.
Yep. So the issue, and so lead lists, like, listen, you're starting out, it's hard to find leads. The issue I have with lead lists is that when you buy a list, it's really only about 70% accurate. So you have general CRM decay, which means time expires. People move to different jobs. People move within the organization. right? Which means that data that you grabbed, today is probably still good, but in 6 months or a year, it's probably junk, part of it anyway. And so the way to combat that is to do something called just-in-time lead gen, which means the contacts you need to get, you're grabbing them a week before you're going to hit them, right? And that's kind of what Seamless does. Prospectify does that down in Austin. They're more for kind of enterprise accounts. And then you can also do this process with your Upworker, right, to kind of get that low cost per lead and get things going that way. So it starts with messaging and it starts with data integrity. Those are kind of the two building blocks that you can build your outbound or your inside sales team on.
Sure. Okay. So let's have this situation going on. There is 20-year-old Sean listening to this show right now, and he's the sales guy for his company.
Yep.
And he's like, okay, great. I'm going to hire a data scraper from Upwork to feed me leads that I'm going to use in my CRM. What kind of leads should they be instructing the data scraper to look for?
Yeah. So this really varies depending on your industry. So your industry and your product, when you start a company, you have an idea of who you think the customer is. That may or may not be right. In fact, it's probably wrong, but you can talk to that person, right? Talk to those people you think would be a good fit for you. And you're really going to ask them like who the best person at the organization is for this. You're going to have kind of a right person email or cadence. And whether what you're going to find out
or sales or whatever.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Are you the best person for this? Who handles this? And by having enough conversations with the people you think are right, you're either going to get redirected to people that are better or you're not. And in that case, you can say, okay, wow, I did have the right person, or no, shoot, it looks like it's this title over here. We need to go get these people. And so I would say come up with at least 3 categories of who you think your customer is within a particular vertical, who you think you're selling into, and then talk to them and find out who's good, who else is involved in the decision, who's the best point of contact. And as you get those data points, suddenly it's going to become a lot clearer what you should do and who you should be talking to.
Sure. I really like that. But one question that kind of comes to my mind is, let's say that 20-year-old Sean is thinking to himself, okay, how much development of the product should I be doing before I reach out to customers? And they say, oh, this sounds great. Is it ready? And you're like, actually, it's just an idea phase. Or is that a good thing? Because then you can tweak it before you're too time invested in case you had the wrong thing. And they're like, actually, that's totally not what I want. I would prefer this. Right? Like at what stage in the development do you start doing outreach to customers? And there's a sub question from that. How do you deal with, like, I know that there's people who are fearful of, well, what if I tell them what my idea is, or I tell them what my product is, and then they're going to steal it, or they're going to tell their tech department to like, well, we can just build this ourselves. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So this actually happens a little bit on the investment side. So some companies, usually newer companies, will try to ask investors to sign NDAs because they're worried that the ideas might get out there. My biggest piece of advice on this is the idea you have, especially the idea you have at the start, it's not really worth much. What's worth something is you and your team and the ability to execute and iterate on that idea, right? Mm-hmm. It's the saying, a good team will take a bad idea and make a better one. A bad team will take a good idea and make it terrible. Like that's just how it is, right? So
interesting.
You are the value add in your business. Don't be afraid to share what you're doing. The other thing that I'll say, the benefit of sharing what you're doing is it creates accountability. Tell anyone who will listen. Tell your family. Tell your friends. Tell your business colleagues. This will help you create this accountability that we're doing this, right? Which helps you burn your boats and know that you've created this sense of urgency for yourself around creating a startup. Mm-hmm. In terms of your first question, how do I know I have something that's worth showing or I'm in the idea phase? The readiness of your product is actually, it's important. It's always going to be important. We talked about being good. You want to be good before you go out and try to raise money or go get customers. But the other thing that's important is how effectively you can communicate what you do. And they're almost inversely related. If you can explain what you do to save your life, you need something that you can use to show what you do, or no one will take you seriously, period.
Right.
Ever. If you're really good at explaining what you do, the amount of product you actually need is inversely related. A lot of enterprise sales reps who can talk the talk and know the value, they'll walk in with a PowerPoint deck, and they very rarely showed the software back in the day. You can use a similar approach where if you have a really solid pitch, you can have some minimal wireframes and some workflows in a slide deck as opposed to showing them a fully blown up product. And what you can do is you can say, hey, I'm backlogged in terms of actual potential deployments with you guys, I'd love to have you try the capability. It won't be ready until December or February. Would that be a decent timeline for us to roll something out for you and your team just on a trial basis or whatever it is? That way you can get some users, right? Or some people who are queued up to use the product, and you don't need to have a product fully baked. Ultimately, you're going to want to hear from them. What are the features and capabilities you think are most important? That's going to influence your development efforts, right? Got to talk to your customer.
So that's interesting that you're kind of saying that. I was just like, I think it was 2 days ago, I was at a meetup with a couple of internet entrepreneurs in Minneapolis. And one guy was having issue. He went and he pitched his product. He has a SaaS company.
Yep.
And so he was kind of either at like the 90% like completion, right? So there's actually like a live demo that they can show, and like, this is what it's going to look like when your people are using it. And he went and he actually got these pitches with these huge organizations. I can't like say who they are, but, and they are like, this is great. We want it right now. We have 20,000 sales reps that want to use your tool by the end of the year. And he went, oh my God, like I'm in like beta version. I was hoping you were going to say, oh yeah, like we'll have a team of 50 people test it out and then maybe we'll roll it out company wide. So now he's almost in panic mode because he's like, oh my God, this huge, Fortune 500 company wants to roll this out to 20,000 sales reps. And what if it breaks on like day one? You know what I mean? Like, what's that going to look like for my reputation? How is that going to look for like repeat business? What if it's like too big of a task to fix? So like, how do you kind of approach, there's the other end of the spectrum of like, you had too successful of a pitch. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, one, that's a good problem to have, right? You've created kind of a success disaster. The first word in success disaster is success. So you're doing things you want to be doing. In those scenarios, if you have an opportunity at that level to hit it out of the park, you want to drop everything else that you're doing. You want to double down on that opportunity. That's my advice. If you've got a marquee customer who's willing to deploy you at scale and you've got contract value behind it to back it up, that's what you want to do. That's the easiest way to move your company forward. And maybe that means hiring more people, more developers. Maybe that means going out and raising a funding round to meet the need there. You can do some of those different pieces because you've gotten this proof point. You really want to lean in to the opportunity is what I'll say on that one.
Right. Does that mean that, let's say in order to hire some people, you have to raise a little bit more capital? And a lot of investors are going to say, well, do you have an order placed? You know what I mean? Like, or what do you, a purchase order, right?
Yeah.
Is that something that you think as an investor and as an entrepreneur? What do you think about that?
Oh yeah. I mean, listen, you want to have your customer sign on the line that's dotted, right? That's what counts the most.
Right.
I think in terms of getting POs, in the example you mentioned, if the customer is willing to deploy with you by the end of the year, I would get something inked with them and say, hey, great, I understand. And maybe you want to scale it down. I understand you want 20,000. Let's do 1,000. We're going to be ready for you in December. And then you've got something that you can take back to an investor and say, hey, here's our customer. Here's why they're excited to use it. They're going to be deploying with us at the end of the year. We need to scale up in order to meet the need. And that's an understandable situation for folks to help you with.
And just from like an investor standpoint, that's like a hallelujah moment, like, oh, the only reason we're here is because we really need to scale. Like we need fulfillment money. You know what I mean?
It's funny. A lot of people will pitch their business like that, whether it's real or not. Right. I think if you have like some real forcing functions, again, it's like the urgency, right? The number of deals that you see that actually have real urgency is small. The number of people that are trying to manufacture urgency is high. But if you've got real urgency, I would lead with that. It's like the old like myth. I actually don't know how true it is, of like the old Google slide deck where they would just show their number of users just like going up, and they're like, "Yep, we need to raise money to deal with all the traffic. Can you help us?"
Yeah. So actually, I'm going to ask you another question that was talked about at the meetup, because I feel like if anybody is a good person to ask, it's going to be you, because you had pretty much a SaaS product that was rolled out, to companies. So when a company like that comes up to you and says, okay, we want to roll this out, we've got 20,000 people on the docket waiting for this product. How do you deal with pricing at that kind of a scale? Because obviously there's like enterprise, and like, just how deep of a discount do you give when you're dealing with that kind of numbers?
Yeah, I mean, especially if it's your first contract, you're not going to know what to price. For most B2B SaaS products, they end up pricing not enough, and very rarely are they overpricing. The customer will beat you up again if you're overpricing. They'll try to push your price back down. There's a few different things you can do. I mean, with your early customers, with your first 10 customers, you're probably going to charge them 10 different prices. It's just how it works because you don't know.
Mm-hmm.
You don't really know. How much value are they getting? I don't know. I think there's value here. I think they're getting this. I think they're getting that. Ultimately, they'll help you prove out the value to the next 10, the next 90 as you go from 10 to 100.
Mm-hmm.
So that early price, like the one thing I'll say is the next time you get a customer of that same type, there's a great rule. Actually, it's by Jason Lemkin with SaaStr. And he says that, when you're doing, software as a service sales to large accounts and you land one early on, the next time you get an account of that same type, double your pricing just to see what happens. Because more often than not, you way underpriced the first one. So since this is the first one, I would try to do that exercise. Think about what you think is a reasonable price and then double it. Because worst case scenario, you're going to get beat up by the vendor management function and you might have to come back down. Hopefully you end up in a place, right where you want to be. Having said that, my biggest, grievance with any sales rep or any startup sales founder is when you tell someone a price and you immediately cave on the price. So often people think of price as this innate barrier to moving a deal forward. And maybe it is. Some cases it can be. Some cases it's definitely not. If they have budget, you giving them an extra $20K doesn't help anybody. Doesn't help you. They were going to buy anyway. Right? So when you're in your negotiation, you want to find out what's important, what else is important, what's most important. And you do this essentially by taking positions. Sean, we can't spend over 20 grand. Sean, we have to have it by October. Sean, it needs to do X, Y, and Z. You take those positions, blanket statements, and you turn them into interests. Oh, why? Why do we need to have it by December? Oh, there's a training program coming out. Oh, you need to use it for that. Okay, great. Why can't it be more than 20 grand? Oh, the budget cycle renews in February. So maybe if we started small here, we could roll into something larger then. Okay. So often people just take what the customer says as like the etched in stone. Yeah. It doesn't have to be. You can understand what's going on.
I agree. And with the scenario you said, they could, start out at a lower price. Start out with a smaller case, right? Let's say from October, but then come February when budgets come back to roll around, you say, okay, now let's roll this out to more users. And then you go back to the price that you were originally talking about.
I think of it this way. If you're the startup founder, if you're doing that early stage sales, it's like you're a pitcher on the mound. And if you only are, listening to what the customer says and treating it all as it's etched in stone, you're going to throw a fastball every single time. But the customer, the batter will tell you what to throw. They'll say, oh, it needs to be this day. And you're like, oh, interesting. Like we can start small. Like maybe that's your change up. You start with a small pilot contract and then you can expand. Yeah. Or they'll say something else and you need to go a different route. You need to go for as much as you possibly can get right now. Maybe their project's getting defunded in February. Shoot, well, what can we get going now? Let's try to go for 2,000 or 3,000 people. And so it's almost like you're learning these other pitches by listening to your customer. The customer will tell you which pitch to throw to win the deal. Right.
And the worst case scenario is people who panic on the spot, in real time. Let's say that you and me were, customer SaaS producer, and they say, we need it for this amount. And then they immediately say, okay, you know what I mean? Or no, you know what I mean? It's okay to sit there and think and do math in your head. That'll actually impress the customer. Oh, I guess their pricing wasn't just a poof imaginary number that, oh, this sounds good, let's just price it at that. If you're actually crunching numbers, okay, this is what it costs for storage, this is what it costs for whatever, blah blah blah, support, blah blah blah, then you can actually think, and you can say, you know what, and it's okay to say, you know what, let me get back to you on that. That's something I have to check into and see what we can do for you, because that provides you a cushion for defense, that you don't have to immediately give into what they're asking, because it's bad if you say, oh yeah, we'll do it for that price, and then you come back the next day, you know what, we can't do it for that. That just looks worse.
Over promise, under deliver. The one thing I will say about pausing. So pausing in and of itself is a very powerful tactic in sales. Mm-hmm. And when someone says something, you can just give them a long pause. And if they're not confident in what they said, sometimes they'll retract what they said and start negotiating with themselves. This happens with new sales reps all the time. I'll get the product demo. They'll mention the price and I'll just wait. They'll say it's 10K and you're like, oh, and you just sit there and they feel it.
Right.
They feel that awkward pause kind of sit in.
Oh my God.
And then they go, actually 8,500, it's 8,500. You're like, okay, what else you got for me today? You know, you're like, they just gave you something and you don't have to give up anything. So it's a slippery slope. On the flip side, to your point, if someone says, hey, I can do it for 20K and you are willing to accept it for 10, you know, you can jump up and that's a great deal for you. It's twice the value of what you wanted to get. But take a minute, even in those scenarios where you know you can do it, take a minute, because no one wants to be in the deal where the other guy jumps up to shake your hand, because that means that you
then
kind
they
of
feel like they got screwed.
Right. Exactly. You don't want that to happen.
Right. Interesting. So even if they overprice your own product, you go, right. You think, and that is so like interesting.
Right.
What's another like powerful like sales tool that you like that to me is a tangible thing that people listening can like actually start using today. Let's say that they're listening to this on the way to their work. They're like, holy shit, I'm going to use that today. You know what I mean? Like what's another like piece of ammo that you can give them? Yeah,
I would say the one tactic that I always love is this tactic called link and trade. So we use the example where the sales rep just hears silence and then cuts price. Link anything that you do, any give that you make to the customer, link it to something else. Say, all right, if you can get us a signed contract by the end of the month, we can get you that 10% off and go from 10K to 9K. How does that sound? And by doing that, the customer knows every single time they're not going to get anything for free, right? So if they ask you for a feature, if they ask you for a discount, link it to something else. Okay, you have to be a referable customer for us, and we need to get the deal done by the end of the month.
Right.
You know, whatever those things of value that you can get from that relationship, make sure you're driving that conversation. That'll enable the customer to it'll help them take you more seriously, and they know they're not going to be able to take advantage of you.
Right. Because it adds like, it tells them that your time is valuable too. And so many like startups are like, well, I only have, let's say that it's a bigger price, you know, really niche. They're like, I only have like 4 or 5 prospects at a time. Like I really do have a lot of time to commit to them. And that's almost like a bad thing, because if they know that you have all the time in the world and that you're waiting for them, they're going to like, and not everybody will do this, but they could like use that. You know what I mean?
Right. I mean, you always want to have a best alternative to a negotiated agreement, right? And if they feel like you need them more than they need you, they have leverage and they'll use it against you. So even if it's not, you know, as real, you always want to kind of posture in a way that you can walk away from the deal.
So, one other question I want to ask you is, what is one example of like a case study that in your business where with ilos that you had, you know, customer XYZ come in, you used this tactic, this strategy, and you had this kind of an outcome, like a story that people can listen to, and like that, because I always find out that when we use stories in our show, it helps people remember the tactics better, because they think, oh yeah, that's what
sure. And not really like a tactic, but I'll just leverage the importance of following up. So we had a customer that we met with in, it was like October of last year, I think it was. And when we met them, they were very late in their buying process. They had already done their research, their evaluation. We weren't on the list, but we did the demo. We showed them our product and they were very impressed, except the only issue was they were trying to make a decision ASAP. And so following up is important. Everyone knows following up is important, but when you're following up via certain mediums, it only counts when the customer, you know, sees the medium and responds to you. And so make sure that you're actually connecting with the customer on a regular basis. So with this customer, you know, what we wound up doing was I set up a call immediately right after the demo, because I knew they had a short timeline. I set it up for 8:30 that morning, the next day. And we talked through what they wanted to see. So I sent them over some materials. They asked about our mobile capabilities. I sent them an app. He played with it that evening. I followed up with him at 8:30 the next day and said, hey, you know, how did it go with the app? Who else do we need to loop in on the decision to see if this is something we want to pursue? He gave me some names. I said, okay, what do they want to see? And we added them. And then the next day at 8:30, on that call, I booked another call for 8:30. And then, you know, I was like this guy's morning cup of coffee every single morning, connecting with him, seeing how we were progressing, showing him that we were responsive and receptive to what they wanted to do. And then by the 4th day, they had picked us to be the vendor. So their account was open for a total of 4 days. They had already done a lot of research. They were just towards the end of the buying process. But if we hadn't followed up as diligently as we did and shown the product and the company's ability and willingness to work with the customer,
Yeah.
we probably would not have even been considered.
Wow. So you're telling me that to fill in the blanks, there were other vendors that they were looking at for the needs that ilos was providing.
Yep.
And the fact that you were there every single day, the next day, to like follow up on the sales process versus your competitors probably weren't doing that. They're like, oh, we'll just send over the proposal. We did a demo. We did a follow-up. Like,
right.
Now it's just up to their buying decision. Like, we'll just wait to hear back from them.
Yeah. So there's this thing in sales of, if you don't have like a scheduled reason for why the customer's delaying, if there's not something that's happening, if you're just hearing this like long pause, usually it means they're talking to someone else. Like someone is taking initiative with the customer and you want it to be you, right? You want to be that person driving the initiative. One thing you can do to do just that is anytime you're in a meeting or anytime you're on the phone, if you're having a meaningful conversation and it's not that initial conversation, like a cold call, if you've got a scheduled meeting, ask for a follow-up meeting. You'll talk about next steps. You can say, okay, it sounds like we need to loop in this decision maker or run a trial with our product. Why don't we check in Friday of next week just to see how everything's going? Mm-hmm. And by doing that, you're going to know one of two things. One, when you're on the phone with someone, it's very, very hard for them to agree not to meet with you. They basically have to hate you.
I don't want to do that. Yeah.
They have to hate you to agree not to meet with you, right? So you've got that working in your favor. And two, if they do say, no, there's got to be something else, you're going to start to air other objections that would have previously gone unnoticed and unmentioned.
Oh, I love that. And then you can actually confront those objections on the same call. You can say, oh, why and then we'll take another one out of your book. Oh, why is that? Why do you need it done by October? Why do you need it for this price? Right.
Suddenly you've got the interests, not just the positions. Absolutely.
Right. And like, it just goes to prove that like information is, power. It's your advantage, because if you don't know what your customers' objectives are, if you don't know what their issues are, if you don't know what their needs are, how can you be that solution for them?
Right. You can't. So, identifying, again, it all kind of boils back to the three questions, right? If you know those three whys, anything, us, and now, suddenly you're going to be able to show the value and show how you can fit in and meet some of those needs.
Sure. So Sean, I want to kind of like take a little divulge here. So we've talked a lot about SaaS and startup sales. So now let's dive into the other part of your expertise and fundraising. What kind of tangible advice, let's say somebody who's listening to this right now is about to go pitch an investor, right? They have a couple of meetings today with several funds. What are some pointers that you can give them?
Oh man, let's see. So I might take that question and go on the flip side. So the reasons why I think folks struggle with fundraising, there's a couple common mistakes that people make. And so the first I'll say is, that whole idea of how do we get good before we try to go out and raise money or go out and get that customer. And getting good, a lot of times early stages will mean the team. So if you haven't done a good job recruiting other co-founders, if it's just you, if you have gaps like we all do, and you haven't met those gaps, maybe you're a tech company without a tech founder. That's pretty tough. It's very hard to be a tech company without a tech founder. It really doesn't work. You need to get a tech founder, and you probably know you need to get a tech founder. So go do it and then go try to raise the money, right? Get good first. On top of that, I'll say some things that folks do that usually rubs people the wrong way. One is their competition side. So it's very easy to get in this mentality of it's us against them. And we're going to beat them every single time because of these things. When the reality is, an investor wants you to be intellectually honest. They want you to look in the mirror and be able to tell yourself what is really going to be the most likely outcome, which is there will be types of deals that you will be able to win. And there will be types of deals that your competition will be able to win. What do those deals look like? Are you a low-cost provider targeting people that have smaller budgets? Are you this huge differentiated product going after the Fortune 500? When someone mentions usability, are you going to win or lose, right? It's okay, but just have those answers and say, hey, this competitor is doing these things, and they're going to beat us in this segment. That's just the way it is. We're going to beat them over here because this is where our focus is, and these are the things that we're doing. So don't have that us against them mentality. Instead, kind of know where each of you play in the market.
Right. And because for an investor standpoint, if it sounds too good to be true, it almost always is, right? If they say, oh, no, we're superior in every single way. For me, it's much more validating if they come out and be, even if you make something up, even if you actually are like better than them in every way, if you just come up with, you find, because there's going to be something, and no matter how small it is, and say, you know what, they do have us beat. They got way better vending machines in their office than we do, right? Maybe not that, but something to say like, they are beating us here. That's going to feel from an investor standpoint. Okay, they are really being transparent with me. They're being honest.
Yep.
So that way I can make a better informed decision.
And the thing I'll say of it is this, in a market where you don't think you have any competition, or you think you beat the competition every single way, that is a market that you do not understand as well as you think you do.
Interesting. Expand on that.
Yeah. So here's what I'll say. So a lot of times folks will create a category. Like Salesforce was one of the first CRMs, right? Before that, we had, databases that had customer information. We had little black books people would carry around. And Salesforce had competition. The competition was the old category of storing customer information. It was storing it in your head. It was the little black book. It was the database system somewhere.
It was a file cabinet, right?
Right, the file cabinet, right? So Salesforce had competition. Every single company has competition. It can be old categories. If you're creating a wave, that's usually what it is. If you're riding a wave with a bunch of other people, it's the surfers that are next to you. They're your competition more often than not.
Right.
Show your diligence, do your homework, know your market. And by doing that, you're going to know who your competitors are in every scenario here.
For sure. And actually, a company that comes to mind for both things that we just talked about is Amazon. When Amazon was pitching their company, when Jeff Bezos was pitching to investors, he would actually this is what he would tell them. He said, there is a 70% chance you're going to lose all your money and this is going to flop. But if it's at 30% where it, works, we're going to do very, very, very well. Right. But that transparency with people was almost attractive. Obviously it turns off a lot of investors, but for the ones who are on board, they're like an advocate for you. They're on your team because they want you. I mean, every investor wants you to succeed, but if they're in that boat where like they know your chances, but they know what is the light at the end of the tunnel, they're totally for you. They're rooting for you. And then like knowing your category, somebody could argue, oh, Amazon has zero competition. They are like even back then when they started, they're like the only online bookseller. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah.
You could say, no, not really. Like Barnes and Noble and mom and pop bookshops, they are technically your competition right now. It's the people that you might be replacing that are your current competition.
Yeah, exactly. So do your homework on that side. I think that's really important. The other area where I see folks making mistakes is really on their go-to-market. Maybe they've gotten a couple of deals through their network, or they're trying to figure out what levers they can pull. That's totally okay to be in discovery mode. Be really open and upfront about that. Don't come across as you have it all figured out. At the same time, you don't want to say, hey, we don't know the answer to this problem. We're going to go find somebody to figure it out for us. The problems we have today are very rarely solved by people we haven't met yet. And that's especially true for sales. So if you don't know how to sell your product, when you bring on a salesperson and they start to struggle, how are you going to be able to help them at all? You won't. They'll just continue to struggle and flounder, and then eventually 3 months later, you have to get rid of them.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of takeaways in that, because you need to have a plan in place. If you say, this is a problem we have no idea how the hell we're going to solve it. But if you say, we're taking action towards fixing this problem, that's where you're going to, that's better than just going in there and saying, oh, I don't know, we're just going to have to figure it out. Right. So the next question I want to ask you as an investor, what are some components that you look for in your companies, and of the ones you have or have not invested in, the ones that have succeeded and like really blossomed to be successful? What are some of the traits that they have in common? Like, man, it just seems like everyone that succeeds has this thing going for them, or the ones that fail have this thing going for them.
Oh man. So I think for me personally, like the deals that I've kind of spearheaded are usually in categories where I either know a lot about the category they're targeting, or I've used the product. I'll just use an example in town. So Local Crate. So Router invested in Local Crate. They have a meal kit solution for retail. And they're actually the only solution right now that's able to leverage kind of the local co-op and local farmers markets. So you get ingredients that are sourced from kind of your community, which, you're always in a better spot if you can get that. It's generally fresher. It doesn't use preservatives. And then they have a meal kit solution where they teach you how to make food. And I originally met them in TechStars last year as a mentor. And it was a company, Dick, where I met them and I'm like, man, they're growing a lot with marketing channels. Like, it's not really an area where I can help much. I was like, how can I help this company? And I said, you know what? I'm going to use their product. And I made, a dozen Local Crate meals with my girlfriend. And they changed my cooking experience, man. They took me to another level. But the interesting thing was I was able to use the product and I understood the value prop. And I said, wow, this is really interesting. the thing I love about Local Crate is the team. You know, as an investor, you're looking at lines, not individual dots. And that team was always hustling, always kind of getting that next deal, that next opportunity. So when they launched with Target in the spring, it was a huge opportunity to put them into different stores. And I just saw that they had that track record. They were willing to make things happen. On the other side, another deal that I really like is Funnel AI. So what they do is essentially enable you to crawl through, forums and social channels to find people who are upset either with your competitors or looking into a product category. And this is crazy valuable. So when I did sales, we looked at inside sales channels, things like Quora, where people can post questions and then you can have, subject matter experts answer them, or even Twitter, where people are talking about, what should I get? I'm in the market for a new car. Any recommendations? Right. What Funnel will do is they'll actually crawl those areas and take those individual posts and put them in front of your sales teams. So you can take that social sentiment and turn it into a lead. What's so powerful about that, Dick, is you're getting them at the moment where they're upset with your competitor, or at the moment where they're looking. Right. They just tweeted, and that can hit your CRM, and you can say, wow, if I'm a car dealer and someone just said, man, I had a terrible test drive at this Toyota dealership, I want to know about that so I can jump in and say hey, maybe you should be thinking about a new, Kia. Here's what we can do for you. Let's get you over by the lot and show you a way better experience than what you just had. And stuff like that converts. So I set up a demo of their account, and I pretended I had a CRM. I pretended I competed with Salesforce and HubSpot, and I just tracked the leads that it got for me over a 2-week period. And from doing that, I said, yes, I would be able to get meetings using the software. This would be valuable to me as a sales leader. I would buy this. And that's kind of how I knew. I said, all right, this product is really good. And I chatted with Sri and the team. And again, same thing. They kind of were just consistently growing their business. And I said, all right, they've got the track record. They've got a good product. Let's do something.
Awesome. Sean, thanks for having you on the show. We totally appreciate it. We got so many gold nuggets. We're going to have to do a part 2 sometime, because I feel like we barely scratched the surface of the knowledge you can bring our viewers. Oh my God.
We'll do it, Dick. Thanks so much for having me, man.
No problem. And where can they follow up on you? Do you want them to, let's say, is it social media? Is it a website? How do you want them to contact you if they want to follow you?
Yeah. So the best way to stay in touch with me is usually Twitter. So I'm at Hig1921. You can also, I'm new to the Instagram game, but I'm getting out there. It's at Sean Higgins Startup is my Insta handle. So yeah, check me out on social. I'm happy to follow up and keep the conversation rolling.
Awesome. And we'll have everything that Sean and I have talked about, whether it's links, a certain company, or a social media, all in the show notes at onlinegrowthsystems.com/show notes. Sean, thanks for being on the show, and we'll see you next time.
Alrighty. Thanks, Dick. Take care, man.
I come from a town where most of the people are so close-minded. They go into school and they work in a job, but they don't even like it. I won't be put in a box. Nobody telling me what I should rock. Nobody telling me what I should drop, cause I do what I want and just know I don't stop. Recording till 4 in the morning, they snoring. I'm pouring my soul into every story. I'm writing, producing, I mix it, I master, I'm building my craft, and I'm not looking back. I've been going doing things I want to do when I want to.